Member Schutte,
Here.
ex officio Member Rosenberg,
Here.
a quorum's present.
Thank you so much. We're now going to move to agenda item number 3, which is our opening public comment. Is there any opening public comment? I didn't see any on the sign-in sheet, but okay. Then we're going to move on to agenda item number 4, which is approval of our minutes of September 13th, 2023. Does any member have any corrections or changes? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion for approval, please.
Move approval of the minutes.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes of September 13th, 2023. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 5A, which is for discussion only. This is discussion and presentation regarding the 2023 Transportation Network Monitoring Report. And Kelly, are you going to take us through this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So the 2023 CAMPO Transportation Network Monitoring Report outlines the latest who, what, where, and how within the CAMPO boundary. Staff will touch on data describing population, households, safety, roadways, and pavement condition index, the travel demand model and level of service, the travel time index and planning time index, commuting, vehicle volumes, and multimodal transportation. So the census data within the network monitoring report encompasses 21 census tracts that have been updated within the 2020 census are bolded on the chart to the left. So let's begin by looking at who is using the transportation system within CAMPO. In the upper left, the chart indicates the CAMPO population now totals 88,154 people. The areas within CAMPO with the greatest growth from 2020 to 2021 include Central and Northeast Carson City and Dayton in Lyon County. In the upper right, the pie chart shows the percentage of population by age groups. 43% of the population are between 25 and 59 years old. Almost 30% are age 60 or older. 10% are between ages 15 and 24, and 16% are under the age of 15. In the lower left, the pie chart shows that 22% of the CAMPO population identify as Hispanic. The chart in the lower right shows the growth of the Hispanic population within CAMPO region over the last 10 years. CAMPO staff is making an effort to acknowledge this population and engage with the Hispanic community in transportation planning efforts. So now we will get into household census data to understand a little bit more about CAMPO population demographics. So the graph on the left of the screen shows total CAMPO households for the last 10 years. And this household data is along the line at the top of the graph. The bars indicate households with a certain income bracket for each of the last 10 years. What this graph indicates is that over the last decade, there has been a decrease in the households making less than $50,000 and a doubling of households making $150,000 or more. Income is one way to understand households within CAMPO. Staff also look at other household data, as you'll see on the right. So the first donut chart on the top right shows family and non-family households within CAMPO. So family is defined by the census as 2 or more people residing together and related by birth, adoption, or marriage. 66% of families of households identify as family households, and 34% identify as non-family households. The second donut chart in the middle right shows the percentage of households with and without children in the Campo area. Census defines children as persons under 18 years old. 76% of households within the Campo area are without children. The bottom donut chart indicates the percentage of households receiving retirement income. 71% of households do not receive retirement income, while 29% of Campo residents do. Safety is a priority for Campo and has risen as a priority for the nation due to increased traffic deaths on roadways since 2020. In this section of the network monitoring report, staff are looking at who is dying or being seriously injured on our roadways. The fatality rate is calculated by 100 million vehicle miles of travel. Within this graph, the red bars indicate national fatality rate. The gray bars indicate the Nevada fatality rate, and the black line indicates the Campo fatality rate. In 2020, fatality rates in Campo, Nevada, and the nation significantly rose. These numbers have remained high. Campo staff is working on a local road safety plan in partnership with NDOT, which examines site-specific and system-wide solutions to address fatalities and serious injuries within the Campo region.
Kelly,
Mm.
can I ask you on that? I see though that it's also risen nationally. Is there some overall trend or something, or is it related to COVID, or why did we see it tick up everywhere, I guess, is the way I'm looking at it? Any thought process there as to why?
Well, the thought process is that during COVID, people weren't commuting to work. There weren't as many people on the roadways. And so people that were on the road had much more room to go faster, much less barriers in the way of them traveling fast. And so it seems as if drivers more persistently speed and drive recklessly than they did before, used to the less traffic on the road.
So it
Can I-
seemed to come down in 21, but then tick back up a little in,
So within
22.
Nevada,
yeah.
speeding and DUIs are the two leading causes of traffic crashes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I can add to that, Kelly's absolutely right, that there was a trend nationally of particularly speed and impairment related fatalities. No one's on the road, people are feeling cooped up. We know substance abuse increased also during that time. So things went up during the pandemic and they just didn't come back down, unfortunately. And
They got used to it rapidly.
yes, and even though, and just side note, sorry not to take away from Kelly's report, but we just found out at the statewide level, and we use 5-year rolling averages. So even though the last couple years have been really high, we've still met our rolling average target until now. And we are now not meeting any of the 5 safety related targets. And on a side note, I'll be attending next week the AASHTO Safety Summit. So hopefully by next month, we'll have some more to report back on national trends as well as best practices.
Before we get to the next slide, which is what you were just predicting, any discussion about levels of enforcement over the last couple of years, up or down or non-existent?
That's I don't have any of the specific numbers, but that's potentially another factor. The staffing level at least Nevada State Police has been low. In addition, my understanding is that partly because of staffing levels, because of exposure, and just so many people speeding, it's more difficult to enforce. Every stop an officer makes puts them at risk potentially, and so they're a little more strategic about that. So that's one of the big E's we talk about in traffic safety. We had our safety summit a few weeks ago, and so talked at the statewide level. We'll be talking at the national level as well in terms of how do we how do we work together, utilizing enforcement and education, everyone, as well as engineering in order to make our traffic system, transportation system safer for everyone.
Okay, this is not a good trend, so anything you can do to help us make recommendations, we're listening, so, okay. Thanks.
So to Sandra's point, here are the CAMPO safety performance measure data and targets. So although CAMPO supports the state's safety performance measure targets, staff track the number of fatalities and serious injuries within the CAMPO region, and we develop internal long-term safety targets of 0 fatalities by 2050 using those same 5-year averages that Sandra talked about. So this is the same methodology that the state uses to develop their safety targets. And staff were able to update both the 2021 and the 2022 data this year. The number, if we look at the number of serious injuries in the second set of columns, this used to be between 10 and 13 every year. In 2021, there were 32 serious injuries, and in 2022, there were 33 serious injuries. So as you can see from the red colors, none of the internal CAMPO safety targets were met for 2021 or 2022. And again, staff are looking into the causes of these numbers within the CAMPO region and working towards possible solutions with the local road safety plan stakeholder group.
Kelly,
Mm-hmm.
before you move on.
Yeah.
I think when we started talking safety and I looked at the full report and the local road safety plan, I'm still not sure how much of the fatal and the serious injuries are occurring on the freeway. And that's NDOT's responsibility primarily, but we need to see the bigger picture. Because by
To the
look
where.
at this rough number,
the
we
where.
really don't know if it's anything that we could normally do.
Right.
But I think we probably do have a role in it as well. So as you dig deeper, I definitely want to see those freeway numbers and make sure that they're as accurate as they can be.
And I think as we move forward too, we'll have more staff support to keep updating those intersection-related crashes, more crash-related analysis to really understand that as well internally to keep moving forward on that. So now we'll move into what CAMPO residents travel on, which consists of the roadway condition and the pavement condition index. CAMPO staff are supportive of Carson City developing a local road funding educational campaign to help explain the condition of the roadways within the CAMPO region and the degrading condition of local neighborhood roads. This map reflects the pavement condition in Carson City. A pavement survey was last conducted in Carson City in 2022, and an updated PCI estimate was calculated for 2023. So now we'll get into data indicating where CAMPO transportation network is growing and changing. 2 examples of how staff understand where CAMPO is growing are the travel demand model and level of service. So this slide shows the results across the top of the 2020 travel demand model projections through 2050. We've seen this for the last few years within the network monitoring report, and these will be updated next year. The slides below, the pictures below show the increased traffic density along the bottom. CAMPO staff are working with Wood Rogers to update the CAMPO and Douglas County travel demand models to have updated models by the end of the year. 2 other methodologies staff use to understand where transportation is growing include vehicle volumes and TTI and PTI. So this slide on the left is showing 2022 vehicle volumes from NDOT's Trina data. And along the right, with the completion of the system management plan, CAMPO's begun to track and measure travel time index and planning time index for certain corridors. CAMPO will continue to monitor and track corridor annual changes in TTI and PTI. So TTI is a measure of how long it will take you to get from point A to point B during peak traffic times. A TTI takes into account unexpected delays or congestion in your commute. So if we take downtown Carson Street as an example, everything is about 15 minutes away in Carson. So during peak periods of a typical day at 5 p.m. along downtown Carson Street, a 15-minute drive may take up to 19 minutes. And the PTI measures day-to-day travel time variability and is used as a predictability index. So again, if someone chooses to drive downtown Carson Street, and I'm looking at the chart in the downtown Carson Street and looking at the 2022 PTI now of 1.61. And assuming we're driving downtown Carson Street during the wine walk on a Saturday in July, their 15-minute drive would take up to 24 minutes using that PTI index. So in understanding how Campo residents travel, staff began looking at household vehicles. So this slide shows the total households along the top line, and the bars show the number of cars each household may have for each of the years for the last decade. Most households have 2 cars. The number of households that have 4 or more cars has steadily increased from 7.9% in 2011 to 12.7% in 2021. In 2021, there were about 40,000 people commuting to work within the Campo region. And if we dig a little deeper into how people are commuting to work, we can see that in 2011 on the pie chart in the bottom left, 82% of people drove alone, 9% carpooled, and 3% worked at home. Fast forward to 2021, we're seeing that 79% of people are driving alone, so a little bit less. 12% of people are carpooling, and 6% worked at home. In 2024, with the Complete Streets policy, Carson City began a Complete Streets performance monitoring program along the 4 main corridors of Carson City, with the downtown corridor, the South Carson corridor, North Carson, and East William Street. And on the right of the screen, you'll see the latest pedestrian counts along those 4 corridors. And I'm very much looking forward to next year reflecting the 2 new permanent bicycle and pedestrian counters that we recently installed in downtown and South Carson. So this chart is showing Jack ridership from 2013 to 2022. Jack ridership decreased during COVID, as did most transit ridership all over the country. In 2022, staff have seen a slight increase from these pandemic lows. So staff completed an update to the Campo Public Participation Plan earlier this year, aiming to quantify outreach goals. Some examples of 2022 public outreach include collecting more than 300 comments for the East William Complete Streets Corridor project, presenting 4 regional transportation stakeholder meetings, completing 12 public Campo meetings, and distributing 750 postcards to Colorado Street residents with continual updates on the Carson City and the Carson Proud websites. So that concludes my presentation of the 2023 Campo Annual Network Monitoring Report. And next year, staff is looking forward to updating census data, again, to better understand our community and its trends, continued bicycle and pedestrian data, an updated travel demand model, updated TTI and PTI, and continued monitoring of fatalities and serious injuries due to crashes, with hopefully some solutions from the local road safety plan. And in addition, Campo staff is looking forward to including demographics with an environmental justice lens and inclusive of Title VI requirements. So thank you.
Does any member have a question, comment? Ms. Shudi?
More of a comment. Thank you very much. And I especially, this report, there was just so much interesting information, even in terms of, on page 22, the long-term increases in housing unit occupancy can result in local zoning ordinances, policy changes to encourage higher densities, which over time can lead to more pedestrian, bicycle, and transit trips. And it's just that shift. And I appreciate the acknowledgement of that. And when at the end, something unrelated, but I think incredibly important to bridge those is that outreach. The outreach in terms of kind of like you did on Thursday and on Monday, conversations regarding asphalt and regarding road conditions and the clarification of why money is spent for rehabilitation versus rebuilding. And a few folks had said to me, I just don't understand, why are they ignoring the really, the streets that are in terrible condition and putting the money to the other. And it was that very outreach that explains the cost effectiveness of taking care of things before it really gets super expensive. I know that isn't about this report, but I think all of it overlaps. And so thank you for how detailed this is and the different nuances of income and housing and density and outreach, because I think it really helps us move forward in terms of how do we best problem solve. Also, how do we reduce traffic crashes and fatalities? What you said about speed and increased speed and the risk of crashing, and that just ties into other conversations we have had regarding traffic calming measures and sometimes the pushback of narrower lanes. But then really understanding why narrow lanes are beneficial sometimes, why shorter distances on crosswalks are beneficial. So all of that. So just more of a thank you, and it's just so helpful.
Ms. Maloney?
Second the thank you and the kudos on this report. It's really great. I just had a comment looking at the PCI maps. I'm curious. I did get a call recently about the failing roads, sort of similar to the what Supervisor Shudi was saying. And I'm not sure. I couldn't recall the last time we've had a discussion about the roads that have been flagged as sort of as failed. And I'm not sure what staff are doing to look at those failed roads and just confirm that they're okay. My understanding is there's some roads that are failed, but they're not moving, right? They're okay to drive on, but they may be totally alligator cracked. But there may be other roads in town that are moving or maybe pose a safety issue. I don't know. And so my comment was, and I'm just one board member here, but I'd be curious to better understand sort of the catalog of failed roads and just some sort of information that we're looking at them and that, we've balanced that cost versus need as that list presumably continues to get longer. I didn't say that very well, and I know you have tons of extra time on your hands with nothing to do, so, but just wanted to make that comment. It might be interesting to see. Thank you.
So I'm wondering if I'm the general public and I'm looking at this report, why don't you summarize for me what you think the biggest takeaway is? We're moving in the right direction, not the right. What did you glean, or what should they glean, or us, from a report? Because oftentimes, we have quite a few reports on all different things, but if you were to look at this one and say, this is what struck me or drove home a point, or what is it out of this report for you?
Well, I think that ultimately, in order to be a transportation planner, you have to take into account where people are living, how they're living their lives, where they want to go. And so you look at where they're working if they're retired, and the sort of travel patterns that you see that determines the ultimate pavement management plan that you want to support the people and how they move through the area. And I think ultimately, with that goal in mind, we have to take into account so many different parameters. So if we look at the jobs housing index, that's really the beginning of a hypothesis that says, oh, maybe we should be looking at these travel patterns within the travel demand model in order to understand how people are going to be moving, seeing how things are going to densify in certain areas of Carson City or in Lyon County. How do we plan for that in the future? We need to be looking at that while trying to solve the issues at hand right now, where over the last 3 years, we've seen a significant jump in serious injuries and fatalities on our roadways. And us as an MPO need to work with the state as well, because these are not patterns unique to Campo. It's systemic. So I think that there are many, many variables that we need to look at in order to understand what's happening right now and the steps that we need to plan for the future. And so I think that's ultimately why we write this report and why it's so important, and why state staff take time to really dive into the data, is because we want to understand the people that are living here and their transportation trends, so that we can then plan for the infrastructure to support that.
I think I just found it surprising to me that, you know, you plan just what you're saying. And so one of the things for years ago is to say, okay, I wanted to do a complete street. So Carson City adopted a complete street strategy. And so I've been trying to watch the trends and the plans and seeing if our strategies are getting the desired result. And that's what I'm very interested in. When I look at these, I'm like, darn, why are my jack ridership is actually declining? We still haven't even reached back to where we were even before the pandemic. We're not where we were before. And what's causing us not to get there when we're spending so much energy trying to be a complete street? And so I just ask, as you help us in this planning mode, to make sure we're doing the targets that are the right targets, right? Because that's the other thing. If I've got the public that's working out on Gonai Road or something, that's a huge employment base. Are we missing something in our planning that we're not meeting a goal or a need so that the numbers go in the direction that we like? And I think that's what I'm truly asking you is, I was surprised I didn't see, but we don't have the bicycle answers yet, but I was expecting to start really seeing some impact on the changes and the things we've made. Or do you think it takes longer for those to be felt from a planning? And maybe to help me explain to the public, right? Because I did a complete street and I'm supposed to be doing more on the bus, more walking, more on the bicycle, more using the trails, and fewer in cars. And so am I moving towards that goal, or do you see that still out on an 8 or 10-year horizon?
If I may, Madam Chair,
May.
I think that, not to make an excuse, but I think the COVID pandemic has skewed a lot of our data sources, right? We completed the South Carson Street project in, I believe it was 2021, and I don't know that that's, necessarily with the way people are trying to figure out how to work and commute, and where they're working and how they're commuting and what they're doing isn't quite settled yet. And that would be my initial takeaway to sort of your thoughts on the trends there. We also haven't completed our Complete Streets program as a city. We've got downtown, South Carson, Williams Street. So there's still some pieces that are missing, and we don't have that connected network quite in place to be able to see all those trends. And the third thing I would add to that is, we're getting better at doing counts. The permanent count stations were installed 6 months ago or so. And prior to that, it was when staff had availability to go out and put the counters for a period of days. Sometimes they're vandalized. Sometimes we forget to put them out. There's weather events. There's lots of variables with those, temporary deployments of counters. So with permanent stations and the deployment of more permanent stations, I think we'll start to get more relative and consistent data so that it's not the spring one year, the fall the next year, snow during another period. So I think there's some of that in some of the earlier data that still hasn't quite been weeded out, so to speak. So I want to be cognizant and kind of let the board know that there are a lot of factors in there. I understand and definitely appreciate your comments, and and I'm optimistic that we will see some trends in terms of improved bicycle connectivity and more pedestrian use and things like that, especially as we get farther away from that heart of that pandemic world we all lived through. I wanted to also just take a moment and answer your question. My takeaway from this report was safety. I think those trends were alarming, and I think we haven't done much as a city or a region changing our roads, which meant the users of those roads changed, right? There were fewer traffic, as Kelly and Sandra mentioned, vehicles were going faster, and there were some other factors in there other than, the geometry or projects that we've implemented over time. So I think it's interesting that it could come back down on its own, and we're hopeful that through, our local road safety plan, we can help educate and bring projects that can do that. But I think the other element is looking at other ways we can improve safety through project design elements instead of just saying we're going to design this road the same way because it's the way we've always designed it. What features could we fit in here? And we really haven't done a lot of that other than in the complete streets areas as an MPO or as an agency. And so as we start to roll out more projects that do provide more safety enhancements, I think we will over time start to see some improvements. But that was my big takeaway out of this report, was one of the safety elements. And I think that's important to note, that we need to be better at doing that.
Yeah, I think that, well, obviously that's where my questions really were, because I think that, I don't know about the rest of you, but it really struck me too, that we're working so hard and yet the number went in the wrong direction. I mean, it's that simple, right? The loss of life is the worst thing that can happen. We're trying to make our roads safe. That's all there is to it. So I really appreciate your comments. And then just again, for the public to recognize, the most difficult, or another takeaway for me, is I look at the stats and the reports, and I know that there are mitigating issues, like, oh wait, there was no counter there. I think it's really hard for the general public, though, that's looking at a chart and they're seeing, here's 2017, 2018, 2019, and they're not seeing the trends or the things, and you're like, well, that's because in 2021 we added a counter. So it's really difficult for the data to truly be comparative when it's not based on the identical same information. And so I just caution everyone to recognize that there's other data inputs to a chart, right? So just because you have a 5 or a 7 year history doesn't mean it's consistent across the review of that. And I just think it's important so that people don't jump off and say, well, look at that. No. We need a bicycle counter, and we didn't get that till this date. So, and then Sandra, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just a couple things. First of all, kudos, always a great report. It's,
Telling.
we do it at the statewide level, but I actually like the way you guys do it and kind of tell the story and the different factors. Just to back up some of what Chris was talking about in terms of the trends and patterns, people take time to change their behaviors. And particularly with, making decisions about which mode to take, people take into account that safety piece. So even though we've made improvements to provide, amenities to encourage walking and biking, this is my personal opinion, until those safety numbers come down, it's going to be tougher for people to get out of their cars and do something different. But I see some leading indicators already, and I think there's other data that maybe we can help you with too in terms of that. So your drive alone numbers went down, so that's good. to Mr. Novak's point, getting and we have it, it's just not in a very usable format right now, mapping out all of those crashes. So you know where it's occurring. My guess, and we'll need to look at the data to prove that, is those corridors that you have done those complete street improvements on have likely seen a reduction, if not in crashes, at least in speed, which is a primary factor for how severe that crash is. So just because the numbers don't look good doesn't mean you're not doing some of the right things. And we're happy to, I think the local road safety plan will help dig into those details a little bit more. And we're happy to work with you guys to tell that story a little bit better, because it is hard. You see these alarming numbers and it's like, I do like that you compare to the statewide and national average to see it's not that you guys are doing anything wrong. People kind of went crazy during the pandemic and they haven't changed some of those behaviors yet. So yeah, we're looking forward to continuing to work on that. And then in terms of some of the other elements you're looking at, I'm going to say the elephant in the room, which is funding. Your funding locally, our funding statewide, even with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, is not keeping up with the demand. So when you talk about things like pavement condition, until we as a state and we as a community come up with more sustainable funding sources, those numbers will likely continue to get worse. To Ms. Maloney's point, like that failed list is going to get longer until we have sustainable funding for transportation. So just my little more than 2 cents for you all today.
No, it's true. Okay, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say thank you too for the report. It's good to have actual data, and I will be happy to share it with other people in the county. Just one comment on the future growth. You can see that the Dayton area is going to be the major contributor. A couple of meetings ago, we just approved a tentative map for another 499 home subdivision. Building at the Traditions complex is going crazy right now. They're just building a house a day, it seems like, and people are moving in. So we are going to have a lot of growth in that corridor, and we are continuing to meet with NDOT on our Highway 50 issues. So that's all. But again, thanks for the report.
I think I noticed it. Aren't you guys also having a grand opening on a huge expansion of like 40,000 square feet for a web restaurant? So how many employees will be in that?
I don't know how many employees are, but that is a huge building.
So
I mean, I forget how many, 70,000 square feet. It's huge. It's going to
big.
employ a lot of people. And it's a distribution center, and it's also located south of the river, which, as you all know, we have one bridge to go south and one bridge to go back north. So that is a big concern of ours.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, I'm going to miss the grand opening. I'm going to be out of state, but maybe I'll get a private
Wanna
tour.
go? Okay. Anybody else, any comments? Again, this is a non-action item, so we're just commenting. I don't have a vote on this one, so public comment's not necessary, but if there's any that someone would like to make, you're more than welcome. No? Okay.
May I'd
Oh.
like one more?
Well, I don't know, you're pushing it.
Well,
Mr.
from what I've been
Novak.
listening to the other comments, that under the purview of CAMPO, land use decisions are not ours, but they drive transportation. So there's lots of decisions that have been made that we have to clean up after, for, as an analogy. So, be aware of that. Vacant land doesn't create any trips, right? And when you start doing higher densities, realize that the data here is not perfect and there's always a time lag, but there's enough things that have been approved and how many things are under construction. So I would expect congestion to get worse before it gets better, but I think we're giving it the best shot we can at this body, and I think all the other folks that are reviewing development are doing the best they can too, but it's just the way things are going. I mean, the best news is we've got a red line 395 south and 50 east. We have corridor studies for both of those, so it's not a surprise to any of us. Thanks.
Well, and certainly this body has the opportunity, if it would like. Carson City is doing its master plan update, and certainly transportation should be and can be a consideration of the master plan. So I think if there's anyone, on RTC or CAMPO that wants to comment, it's certainly open to do so, because like you said, I don't think anything should be done in a vacuum. And I 100% agree with you that each thing reflects on something else. And then just briefly, I know there used to be a report, and maybe it's in another one, but we used to have a report that told us from Douglas County, Story County, Lyon County, Carson City. It was a report that said how many people left to go to work from those, and then how many came in to come to work. Is that report still available? Because I think that that's just another component that I see a lot of traffic, I feel like, that's coming in the morning. I'm like, where is all of this traffic coming from? And so are there more that are coming in to come to work or leaving to go to work? Have we seen a major shift in that ratio of commutes?
We haven't looked specifically at those breakdown of where people are coming and going from in terms of that whole regionality. We've looked at it certainly within the Campo region. It's an interesting question. I think we can look into it in coordination with NDOT and some of the data platforms that we have access to see if we can pull some of that out.
Yeah, because I think I just agree with all of us, right? The more details and data that we have, it should help us inform better decisions, or pretend we're at least trying to plan for what's happening in the next 5 years and we get some of it right. Right? And data is what helps.
I will say it looked, if I read it correctly, your jobs housing balance is getting better. That's not a guarantee that the people who live here are working here, right?
Well, that's what I said. I would
But,
love
yeah.
to see that other component piece, is that what we're approving in the housing to meet need, is that indeed working on the other, or we go, oh, well, that didn't work. I just ended up sending 500 more employees maybe to Wes's end, right? Which just put more commute traffic on the road. And I don't know the answer, but be interested in seeing that. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 5B, which is for possible action regarding the proposed performance targets for federal fiscal year 24 for capital assets funded by CAMPO and used to provide public transit services as required by the FTA. Ms. Schutte, may I have your disclosure, please?
Yes, you may. NRS 281A.420 requires me to disclose conflicts of interest and abstain from voting when I have a disqualifying conflict. My nephew is Chris Martinovich, who is employed by Carson City, and I will be presenting this item. Chris and I are not receiving compensation of any kind directly related to this item. It will not foreseeably impair or enhance the terms of his service with the city, and we are not affected by the outcome of this item to a greater degree than any other resident of Carson City. NRS 281A.420 only requires abstention in clear cases, and the independent judgment of a reasonable person in my position would not be impacted by my familial relationship. Therefore, I do not have a disqualifying conflict, and I will be voting on this matter.
Thank you so much. Mr. Martinovich, would you take us through this item, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Federal Transit Administration Transit Asset Management, or TAM, final rule requires that federal transit agencies set and submit targets that are quantifiable based on levels of performance. The targets are due to the FTA by October 31st each year, and this item is one that we bring to the CAMPO board annually. Per this staff report, staff have set a target of 12% for the revenue rolling stock class. That's 2 out of 17 vehicles. The targets for equipment and facility classes are both set at 0, as none of those elements in those 2 classes require replacement and are all in a good state of repair. And as an example, a new vehicle was placed into service for the equipment asset class that replaced a prior vehicle, and that was installed into service in federal fiscal year 23. So we have 0 target, where last year we had a 100% target, and we met that target. There is no requirement or punishment from the FTA to replace vehicles or to meet a specific target. The overall goal of the Transit Asset Management Program and final rule is to keep vehicles in a good state of repair, and that's our goal too at JAC. Keeping the vehicles in a good state of repair reduces maintenance costs and ensures we're getting the most out of our vehicles and being as efficient as possible. So the order of planned replacement vehicles is consistent with JAC's approved TAM plan as reviewed by the RTC and as submitted by the FTA. So we'll be looking at replacing 2 of the 17 vehicles in this coming federal fiscal year. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Does any member have a question? I don't see anything. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll accept a motion for approval. Okay, great.
I'll move. I move to approve the federal fiscal year 2024 performance targets as presented.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for the approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. Thank you so much. We're now on to agenda item 6, which is our non-action items. Mr. Martinovich, do you have a report items?
I have a couple of items. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Martinovich, Transportation Manager. I first wanted to welcome 2 new staff members to the CAMPO team. Jared Cragen, who's over there on the end. There's Jared. He's our new Transportation Planner Analyst. And Dan Kelsey, in the glasses there in the middle, just took off his glasses, as our new Transit Coordinator, running over and working over at Jack. So welcome to them, and appreciate them coming on board. Help us out.
Absolutely. Welcome to the team. They didn't go running out of the room, so it's a good start.
They haven't had a present yet, Madam
Oh.
Chair.
There you go.
Next update I want to provide is on our US 50 corridor, East Carson corridor study, as alluded to by Vice Chair Novak. In that, we've kicked off the project. We're in the data collection phase. With support from Parametrics, our consultant, we're coordinating with NDOT, and we're starting to do the detailed analysis of getting all the data points, reviewing old studies, understanding traffic patterns, and starting to collect that. We do have a series of meetings internally kind of scheduled over the next few months, and ultimately start to compile a report and get some public and stakeholder input on that as we go forward. So that's just getting kicked off. Definitely more to come on that particular study. Similarly, NDOT leading the Southern Sierra corridor study. This is along US 395, beginning at Clearview and running all the way to the California-Nevada state line. Commissioner Erb is part of that, and that study is being led by NDOT, and their planning division. Sandra's team is leading that. I do want to note on that particular project, a public meeting is scheduled for, I believe, November 6th in the community center here in this building to gather some particular input on where they are in that study. I'm not as familiar with that one or where it is, but I just wanted to provide that background to this board, as there are public meetings coming for that particular study. Was alluded to previously in the earlier item of our local road safety plan. So we've held our first workshop for the local road safety plan. We're continuing to refine that data. We're looking at specific locations where we can potentially meet out in the field and discuss potential solutions and ideas. Many stakeholders are involved in that at the city and the different counties. So I appreciate everyone coming together at that workshop and having the conversation. Office of Traffic Safety and NDOT and the fire department, the sheriff's office, both counties, Lyon and Douglas County, were in attendance. It was a good meeting, and there's more momentum building around that study. So super excited about that one. And that was the last thing I had. So thank you.
Great. Does any member of CAMPO have anything to share with one another? We're a quiet bunch tonight. Something's wrong. We're in good shape. I was like, uh-oh. Okay, well, with that, then we'll move on to our final public comment. Does anyone from the public wish to address the board? Okay, with that, then we are adjourned as CAMPO, and we will reconvene at 25 after for RTC. Thank you so much for a good meeting. And it's good to see you in person. call the Regional Transportation Commission to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bagwell,
Here.
Vice Chair Schudy,
Here.
Commissioner Dodson,
Here.
Commissioner Maloney, Commissioner Novak,
Here.
a quorum's present.
Thank you so much. We're now on agenda item 3, our public comment period. Since so many ran in, I'm sure they're all just waiting, but I'll ask just in case. Okay, I think this is so exciting. All the public should be here. Agenda item number 4 is approval of our minutes of September 13, 2023. Do I have any corrections or updates? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion for approval. So
I'll move to approve the September 13th meeting minutes of the RTC as presented.
I second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Dotson and a second by Commissioner Schudy. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 5A, which is discussion and possible action regarding a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on our 90% design for the East William Street Complete Street Project. That was a mouthful, say that 3 times fast. So I see our project team. Darren, are you going to start us off, or Randy?
I'll start us off.
All right.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Randy Rice, City Engineer for the record. I've also brought our Senior Project Manager, Darren Anderson, here to help me present as well, and he'll be doing the second half of the presentation. So again, today we're here to discuss the progress of the East William Complete Streets Project and then where we're at the 90% design. So just quick project overview as a reminder, we're going to be working on the street between Carson Street, North Carson, and Russell Way, just west of I-580. We're going to discuss briefly what we've been up to since the last time we presented to this commission. We're going to try to highlight some of the things that have changed since the last time to kind of focus on that conversation rather than just repeating what we've already discussed. We'll talk about the next steps and where we're at in the process again, and then how to contact us again if you have any questions or need anything after this presentation. So, what have we been up to? Of course, we've been working on progress towards the 90% design. We finished that up back in August, so about a month and a half ago. We have successfully completed our NEPA clearance, so we did get a categorical exclusion for the project, so we're successfully through that, which allowed us to continue on with our property negotiations. You can see here we've continued our public outreach as well, and you can see there's an image here at the bottom of the screen. Those colors that you're seeing represent an example, just one portion of the corridor. The red would represent, say, a permanent easement, and the green would be a temporary easement. So the way the process works, if anyone needs a quick reminder, is that oftentimes our improvements will encroach into private land, and so a part of the federal process, we have to provide just compensation to the folks that we're disrupting on their property. Oftentimes, those improvements are temporary in nature, so we might have form work or disruption to the landscaping or improvements to irrigation that we have to take out to facilitate new sidewalk, curb and gutters, for example. So we would give them a small monthly fee for that as an example. And then the red one, we would give them a compensation as essentially a permanent easement, and that would typically be for like a public access easement. So if we've included additional sidewalk or widened the sidewalk, we might need to acquire an easement there to ensure we have the rights to allow the public to go through there. So quick recap, some of the things we've talked about last time, we've reduced one lane on eastbound traffic from Carson to Stewart. We do have bike lanes throughout, and we have included landscaping and lighting. We have changed the way some of the vehicle turning movements have progressed throughout the corridor. We've done some traffic volume improvements. We do have a number of overhead undergrounding of power lines and telecommunications that we're proposing, also water and sewer improvements. We do have a couple of electric vehicle charging stations that are proposed at Mills Park at the parking lot. And again, I mentioned the undergrounding of overhead. Okay, so just a quick recap here through the project here. This is what the project looks like right now. Here is the overlay of what the project is anticipated to look like once we're finished. And then this slide here, again, we're just highlighting the things that have changed or may look different than what you've seen or used to seeing at the previous design stage. One example I'll highlight on this particular slide is we did propose a median that went across, essentially blocking access for left-hand movement going northbound out of Plaza or restricting movement going into Plaza. You can see that's a double yellow stripe line there. So we do want to discourage movement from going that direction. Alternatively, after talking with a number of our stakeholders, we did hear concerns that that was a major delivery corridor for some of the businesses that reside on Plaza Street. And so throughout those conversations, we did negotiate with those folks to try to come to a better realization of how this corridor might work for them. And so we are currently proposing a pork chop that discourages left-hand turn movement out of that Plaza Street going north. We have redefined some of the landscaping arrangements through there. We've identified the locations where the low-impact development is going to reside within the corridor. And as a reminder, low-impact development is essentially a small stormwater basin full with vegetation. That vegetation hopes to uptake some of the water that comes from a storm event and improve the water quality before presenting itself downstream into our storm drain infrastructure. Next slide is Stewart to Roop. Here's the overlay of some of the improvements we've done. Here in this particular example, this is basically what you've already seen. So not a lot of changes in this corridor. And then for this, I'm going to turn it over to Darren to talk about the next half.
All right, so on this slide is Roop to the east, so it's along the first part of the west side of Mills Park. And so we're showing the existing here, and then the improvements, and then the changes that happen from 60 to 90%. So in this location, we've had a few discussions with the property owner on the northeast side of Roop and William Street, just because they've got some driveways that are pretty challenging to accommodate. So we've been going through some revisions with them. Some other things that are shown here are there was a median that was shown to block left turns for westbound traffic into the parking lot that's along Mills Park. So that median is now removed. And then the continuation of the LIDs, the stormwater treatment facilities. So then going further along the Mills Park frontage, probably the most notable thing here is the location of the pedestrian crossing. At 60%, we had the three options, with one being further east and then the other being further west of this location. So this one's showing the one that was given direction to at that time. The bus stops also moved along with the pedestrian crossing. Previously, they were further to the east at State Street. And then kind of more of the same with the stormwater, the LIDs, and then the landscaping being refined. So then going further east, just west of Solomon Street, probably the most notable improvement or change here is the median at State Street, and then the biggest change from 60 to 90% was the change to a glue-down curb for that median. The bus stop location was at State Street previously and moved over to the west. So then
The
Solomon.
bus stop moved to the other side. Yeah, I don't go so fast that, just in case public's listening, I would really love to point out the few things. And then on that one, the other big issue was we had discussed that we would do the glue down so that it could be taken up if it didn't turn out to be the right solution, and it wouldn't be as costly. So we would do a glue down on that, so.
Correct. And just to clarify, the bus stop was moved in coordination with the crosswalk. So for those listening, the crosswalk was at State Street. Then after from input from our stakeholders, both with the board and RTC, we were given direction, and the option that was most desirable was further to the west. And so the bus stop, obviously it makes sense to have that located closer to the crosswalk for people needing to access those services.
Okay, Randy, on that pedestrian crossing, what did you finally decide for any type of signal or sign or what?
Great question. Thank you, Commissioner Novak. So we do propose dual RRFBs in this location at the moment. I believe at the board level, we were asked to look at some other options. We did that. Unfortunately, we did not find an option that met the criteria that we were asked to look at, which was essentially a coordinated pedestrian button that would discourage pedestrians from crossing the crosswalk, and it would only time with the signal at Solomon. And so, unfortunately, after talking to a number of consultants and calling a number of manufacturers or vendors of those products, there really isn't something that we could find that would be well suited for that. So it is a traditional RRFB at this location.
So then, starting from Solomon and heading east, again, the existing as it is today, And then with the improvements, and then noting the changes here, there's nothing changed from the 60 to 90% other than the refinement of the landscaping. So curb, sidewalk are as shown previously. Then continuing east, here is at the intersection of Humboldt. And in this area, there was some minor revisions to the median curb that goes into the driveway to that shopping center just east of Humboldt. Previously, it was shown to not allow a left in, and now it allows the left turn movement in, but not the left turn movement out. And then this is the very east end of the project, getting towards I-580, and no changes from that in this last section. So just to highlight a few other things, one of the items that we've discussed throughout the corridor with these changes from 60 to 90 were the landscaping and then the low impact development improvements. So just to talk a little bit more about the landscaping, with this being a corridor to the downtown area, there's really 3 different zones for this project, which is the downtown zone, transitional zone, and then the NDOT native zone. So the far west side of this project will be to match the theme of the downtown area, downtown Carson Street. And then the east end will be more to match NDOT's landscaping with more of a rock mulch. And then the transitional zone is just kind of switching between those two as you go through the corridor. Then at the bottom is a cross-section of the low-impact development, just showing the cross-section of what it will be. And kind of in summary, it's water that is draining off the road will go through a curb cut to get into the landscape area, where in smaller rain events, it'll infiltrate into the ground. Larger rain events would go into the storm drain system. And then just to highlight some of the next steps we have going forward, we're just starting the right-of-way process, so we'll be going through negotiations and discussions with the property owners in the next several months. Design will be completed this fall into early winter time. And then once we have right-of-way in place and the design finished, we'll be presenting that information to FHWA and DOT to be able to get the notice to proceed to construction. So we anticipate being able to advertise the project for bids in spring of 2024, and then construction starting likely in mid-summer of 2024, which would put the project duration through 2025 and possibly into early 2026. Just a few other items for the future meetings for the board and other committees. We'll be bringing the construction contract to the Board of Supervisors, and that'll be anticipated to be spring 2024. And then for future outreach, we'll have the community meeting for the construction impacts, and that'll be in spring, summer of 2024 once the contractor's on board. And just showing some of the communication tools we have the Carson Proud site where the William Street project is one of the projects that's listed there. So anybody can click on that and get a periodic update that we post to the page. We also have the text service. So if you text Carson Proud to the number that's listed there, you'll be updated when we update the Carson Proud page. And then my information's there for anybody that wants to reach out to myself. So that does it for us, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Does any member have a question or comment?
I've
Mr.
got one.
Novak?
As you go forward, I know you're going to have to prepare an estimate, and that's always fun. But I'd recommend you go with a range rather than a specific number. It's hard to predict exactly what the estimate's going to be and what the contractors are going to bid, and don't paint yourself in a corner on this estimate number.
Excellent advice. Thank you.
Anybody else? So before we take a motion, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, not seeing any. So what's your pleasure?
All right, I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors accept the 90% design concepts.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second to recommend approval to the Board of Supervisors of the 90% design. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. And I think the changes were well done.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you guys for listening to comments from the community and all the boards, commissions that you present to, and then coming up with something, right? And just don't worry, not everyone is happy with everything, but I just wanted to make that comment. That's a gimme. Never going to happen, I wish. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 5B. This one is discussion only on the presentation regarding our proposed updates to the Carson City Public Works speed limit policy. Mr. Martinovich, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Give me one moment to pull up the
Get it?
presentation.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chris Martinovich, Transportation Manager. Wanted to take us through a little presentation here related to some updates to the Carson City speed limit policy. So as background, the policy was completed and presented to the RTC back in 2020. And so that's the version we're starting with and making a few edits to. As we're all aware, speed limits can be very complex. They can be subjective and they balance mobility with safety, as was discussed earlier at the CAMPO board meeting. Number of existing laws are outlined in the policy for governing speed, both the Nevada Revised Statutes and Carson City Code 10.20.010, which states that, just as background, unless otherwise posted, the speed limit on Carson City's streets is 25 miles per hour. So if there's no speed limit sign, 25 is the de facto speed limit. I'm sure there's a more legal term.
So
but I don't
when
know
in
what it
doubt,
is.
25.
Yep. The goals of establishing the original policy were to provide an outline for developing a consistent and data-driven approach for reviewing and establishing speeds in Carson City. The recommendations that are outlined in the policy or ultimately put into the policy were based on multiple sources, not only from a local and state level, but in the national level, and colleges and university research has been done on this extensively. And so those were taken into account for in the policy. Policy itself contains three main parts. The first part is establishing speed limits for new roads. The second part deals with reviewing speed limits on existing roads. And the third part, which we'll be discussing a little bit more today, is related to speed limit signing. So as I mentioned, there are a number of updates. Those updates are included in the exhibit attached to the staff report. I'm going to call them markups. Red line, I think they came out green. I'm sorry if they're different. They may be blue in some of these. I don't know. The marked up version of the report. We updated the beginning section, which reflected updates to NRS 484. The bulk of the updates occurred in section 7, and then we also made miscellaneous updates throughout, as noted in the policy revisions. So first of all, primarily wanted to talk about speed feedback signs. The first element related to them and the major updates to the policy were when and where they are used. So per the policy, we're using them primarily in school zones. We're using them at locations of unexpected or unusual roadway geometry, such as a sharp curve or an edge or some sort of condition, or at specific locations where reductions to speed must occur. I don't know that we have any of those right now, but an example of that could be transitioning from a freeway to a highway where you have 75 to 55 type mile speed limit reductions. That's just an example of, where reductions must occur because the roadway character has changed significantly.
Go ahead.
Quick question on the speed feedback signs. When it talks about the high-speed cutoff at 15 miles an hour above.
Well, I will get to that in a moment.
You will.
Yes, which is the next slide. So that's the when and where. This is the operation of the feedback signs. So they will turn on. The way that we're going to program them is they will turn on once the speeds are registered 10 miles an hour. So if you're riding a bike or you're driving really slowly, you won't see the speed. So 10 miles an hour is when they'll turn on and display the speed. They'll begin to flash in what we call the violation speed when it registers at 4 miles per hour over the posted speed. So if the speed limit's posted at 25, it will begin flashing at 29. Beyond that, we start seeing the slowdown message. And the slowdown message will appear in two cases. One, when the the sign is not in a school zone or when the school zone's not active, the sign will begin to flash the word slow down at 10 miles an hour over the posted speed limit. So using my analogy, as if the speed limit is 25, it'll begin flashing slow down at 35 miles an hour. Or if the school zone's active, then it'll begin flashing slow down at 20 miles an hour. And that's again to encourage slower speeds in school zones as that is a priority of ours. And then lastly is the high speed cutoff. So this would occur at 15 miles over the posted speed limit. And I'll explain this a little bit more in detail. So the reason we generally want to have them turn off is that people in the past have tried to race some of our speed limit signs, and they will see how high they can get the speed to go. Some of our signs have the capability of displaying a slow down message constant or a flashing only slow down message. Not all of our signs have that capability. So for the ones that don't have that capability, and globally, our preference is to just have them go off so that we don't have people trying to drag race the speed limit signs. Okay. So those are the updates related to the speed feedback signs. I just wanted to kind of go back through one of the other sections of the policy in reviewing speed limits. As many of you know, we get a lot of, not a lot, but we get complaints and concerns regarding speeding on individual streets. And so we have a process in place for reviewing and analyzing when we have to do a more detailed study. And so our policy outlines a process for when we review speed limits. And that is outlined here on the screen. So if one of these has occurred on a particular street, that triggers us to look at it a little bit more in detail. And generally, once one of those is triggered, this is more or less the process for doing that study. We first go out and we collect data to obtain the existing 85th percentile speed, or the speed at which 85% of the cars are traveling. Then we take a look and we review the roadway geometry. We look at how straight the road is, if there are curves on the road, how wide the road is, if there's features along the side of the road. We review the roadway functional classification. What is the road meant to be? How is it meant to work in the region? We review crash data over the last 5 years. We also consult with the sheriff's office to see if they've had any concerns or complaints or any specific things that they've noted over a period of time. They collect a lot of data that we love to get our hands on and coordinate with them specifically on. So that's one of the reasons we work with them. And then we complete the study and ultimately set the speed limit based on those factors. So once we complete the study, we take the 85th percentile and we make sure we account for those geometric safety enforcement factors and incorporate that safe systems approach consistent with the Federal Highway Administration guidance and our local road safety plan has been noted. Obviously, speed limits are always set in 5 mile an hour increments, and we tend to round down on that. So when we get complaints or concerns about speeding, almost always we'll go out and collect the data. Even if it doesn't trigger the need to do a formal study, we oftentimes go out and collect the data. If we do see high speeding rates, significantly over the speed limit, we'll absolutely forward that information to the sheriff's office, let them know what's going on, what the concerns were, complaints were, and we let them take it and run with it from the enforcement side of things. We also collect that sort of internally and we analyze it, and we use that in terms of what kind of improvements can we make should there be a project in this area. So depending on how the data comes in and how our project schedule works out, we may be able to implement some safety measures that could help reduce speeding if the time comes and everything lines up with the project. So that's one of the factors that we can consider in our project identification and prioritization methodology. So I just wanted to provide that background to this board and to anyone listening that, we have a process for speed-related concerns, and we have the policy that outlines kind of our process for dealing with those. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on the policy or any recommendations. I do know there was one typo that was mentioned prior to the meeting. I think I used the word venerable instead of vulnerable, so we will make that connection in terms in the policy.
I thought he was
We'll
tricking
do
us. We knew what it meant. So I have just a general question when I'm looking at what triggers things, and this overall makes sense to me, but let me take a specific scenario that I see in town continually, and I don't know whether it's the highest crash scene in Carson City or not, but I travel it often. So College Parkway is a perfect example to me, and I see the airport fence knocked down, right? It has a sharp curve. I don't know. I think you put it up. They put it up, and somebody runs it over I don't know, in 2 weeks. So, but I don't see a flasher or something there. Is it happening at nighttime and they're just over driving it? I just ask when I look at all of this kind of stuff and everything we've been talking about, safety and all of this, that fence is down more than it's up. So what is my traffic device or methodology to help stem or solve that problem?
Well, in that particular instance, I don't know if they're all happening at night, but I know a lot of them are happening at night. And I don't know the impairment situation of the driver. They could be impaired. So one of the things we've done out there more recently, I'll step back. And in the past, my experience with that particular intersection is the fence was being hit quite frequently. And so what we did is we put up those chevrons, those reflective
Okay.
black and gold signs, and we also put up the white guideposts along the outside of the sidewalk. That seemed to reduce for a while. That seemed to reduce the number of crashes. We've had another one recently, but there was a period of almost a year, maybe more than a year, where there wasn't anything into that fence. So we were pleased to see that small mitigation of signage seemed to have reduced the number and frequency of crashes at that location. So we like to take an incremental stepwise approach. So I think our next step at that particular intersection is to look at striping. There is no striping.
roadway.
There is no striping on the
Yes.
outside
Yes.
of that particular curve. And so if you're driving at night and your headlights are shining on the road, maybe you don't pick up the signs, but maybe you follow the striping. If there is no striping, there's nothing for you to follow.
Mhm.
So we have a project out there, our District 1 College and Airport Road project. We're going to be, sealing that road with pavement preservation. We're going to look at see what kind of striping enhancements we can make along that particular curve. So we like to take a stepwise approach to see if there are elements we can do before instituting something like a radar sign. But I think another level, taking a look at that, to your point, Madam Chair, is that a feedback sign could be another level there
That's-
to alert drivers that, hey, there's a curve coming up.
Mhm. And I guess that's, again, overall, I think that's what we're all after, right? What are
Yep.
the areas in the community that, for whatever reason, it's not working with the drivers? Whatever's posted, blinking, whatever it is, that spot to me, I see a lot.
Mhm.
And it could be just because I travel that road a lot or live in the area. I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, so I'm seeing it a lot, and there may be other areas of town, but I really appreciate the explanation, and I think it, again, helps the public understand this might be your last stage, is that there's other things you do before you hit to a flashing
Right.
sign, and the rationale for that is because a flashing sign is more expensive, or you also think that they become accustomed to them and then start ignoring them? I mean, is there
Yeah,
you
both
don't
of
want too
those.
many?
Both of those.
Both?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, anything you can do to help that issue, just not have the, right?
Sure.
It's got to be property damage, and hopefully it's,
Yeah.
well, and hopefully it's not fatalities. It's not people
it's
getting
not. They're
ejected
not
out of the car.
fatalities.
It's not people, anyway, that it doesn't go with all those other statistics we were
Mhm.
looking at earlier. So, okay, anybody,
Okay.
I
Mr.
got
Novak?
A couple of questions or comments. On the speed feedback signs, do those actually collect the data as well?
Some
know,
do,
80
some don't. It depends on the manufacturer and the operation of the sign.
Right, and we're just looking at permanent ones, and it's only the sheriff's department that has the portable ones? Or is there any reason to get more portable ones from the public works standard?
This policy is specific to the static ones along the side of the road. I don't know the policy for when and how the temporary ones are deployed by the sheriff's office. I'd have to coordinate with them further to learn their thoughts on that.
Okay.
I know one of the issues is neighborhood complaints. So he'll roll
Oh, there we go.
I know that's one element that he'll take it there just so that the okay, because it usually starts with, or a comment was, people think it's everyone else that's speeding through their neighborhood, but when he puts those up, they find out it's themselves. So
Yep.
be careful what you aspire to. If you want sheriff's enforcement, you might be getting yourself a ticket.
Right, and
So,
my last quick comment I mentioned to you previously, according to the existing old code, the speed limit for trucks citywide is 15 miles an hour.
I believe that's what it says.
And I'm going, there's a lot of
I'm-
delivery
Do we have a
trucks.
single sign that says trucks 15?
Not to my knowledge.
I was gonna say, I can't.
That's what when I was reading that through and I go, whoa.
Is
I
it
think
in our
that's something we
code?
can consult with the DA's office on. Maybe if it is in there, making a revision, we'll have to consult and see what's
Yeah.
in there.
We'll throw that one for a future lookup for Adam if we have a actual CCMC code that says trucks are 15 miles an hour. I don't remember
It,
seeing
it may, it may be in there. We'll have to confirm.
Yeah, just take a look. Thank you.
Adam Tully, for the record, Deputy District Attorney. I'd be working from memory on this. I don't remember seeing that, but it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah, notice that's what I'm saying. I'm punting to you. I'm like, boy, I don't remember that. Yeah, but I mean, I don't remember a backup document saying that's our policy, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist, because I have found some stuff from what was I just looking at that I forwarded to 1984?
Yeah,
For Dale
that one
Drive,
street, yes.
1984, so trust me, there's some old stuff out there. Okay, is there any other? Sure, Ms. Shooty.
And this, I think it's just in generalities, but at a spacing as to periodically remind drivers of the roadway's regulatory speed limit. So in terms of signage spacing, is there kind of a typical distance, or just really it depends on the neighborhood or the road?
There is no set guidance. I mean, I think it's sort of the discretion of the Public Works Director or myself to figure out what those locations are best. We don't have a lot of long straight roads that don't have intersections where you wouldn't see the speed limit anyway, but
Okay.
there could be instances where you've traveled some distance and as a reminder, the speed limit could be reposted. But there is not a set
Okay,
1,000 feet or 2,000. There is no number like that.
okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Mr. Dotson?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just kind of thinking about this whole policy and the discussion, rest of the discussion we had earlier. There are comments in here that you can't regulate speed by reducing the speed limits. And I did notice that you tweaked slightly the difference in the criteria between setting the design speed and the speed limit signs upward. And I think, I think that made sense to me, because also in this policy, there's a reflection that, if you make the roads too good and the speed limit is set artificially low, that you're not achieving anything. So I think those small tweaks in there, we need to be cognizant of. It's pretty sad, though, when we talk about the reduction of congestion on our roadways because of the COVID issue, and we see an increase in accidents. So
Yeah.
it's a tough balancing act, I think, between, artificially lowering things in the guise of safety. And I don't think you accomplish that. So I think that small tweak is a good one to the difference between the design speed and setting the speed limit sign.
Good comment.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Dotson.
Anybody else? Okay, again, this is a discussion only, but in case there's anyone from the public that just wants to add a comment or, I don't know, teach us, right? I love learning, so if somebody has a comment they just want to make, we'd love to hear it. Okay, with that, then we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is, oh, you did. You found it already.
Yeah, it's Adam Tully, for the record. It does appear that the basic rule, the default rule is the speed limit in the city is 25 miles per hour, except for motor vehicles with a load capacity of 1.5 tons or more, in which case the speed limit's 15.
Well, so is that a F-350? Has that capacity? What? We need to look at that.
Okay.
Put that on the radar for correction, because that'd be a diesel, right? I do actually know what that one is, right? You open up your little thing, and I'm like, whoa, what? That's not a lot of weight. So it's not even a triple axle or anything. It's we need to look at that. Good catch. Anyway, that's a future agenda item. Thank you. That's interesting. Look at how low that is. Doesn't that surprise you? Because even the rating at DMV is, where's it break down on your fee before it calls it a 13,000? Yeah. I'm like, wow. We slipped a digit in there, maybe. Who knows? How old is it? Nope. He has that. How old? 1902.
1991 was the last amendment.
1991. Who knows? Okay. It's old. Okay, we're now going to move on to agenda item number 6, which is our non-action items. We already did a future agenda item thought process there. Mr. Martinovich, your report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to note that next month, we're tentatively going to have a LPA agreement for the DMV multi-use path project, an amendment, I should say, to our local public agency agreement with NDOT to add additional federal funds to that project. I'd also like to, fingers crossed, we have an update to our local road funding progress, the work we've been doing on that, and an outline of some of the meeting results that we've had the last week. So tentatively on that. On that note, moving to the report itself, we had 2 meetings over the last week plus, last Wednesday and this past Monday on our local road funding initiatives. We had a total of 106 people attend those meetings and far more comments than that, which is good. We're continuing to gather comments. People have indicated, I want to think about this and I'll mail it to you, or I'll scan it and email it to you. So I anticipate certainly getting more of those in. The survey is up on our website, preservecarsоncityroads.com. For those who wish to take that survey online, it's available, as well as all the public meeting materials are available on that website there as well. So feel free to peruse those. We discussed last month the purchase of signal equipment, battery backup systems, and detection systems. We have received the ones for Carson City, those 2 staff reports, if you recall those. We've received those, and their installation is beginning here in short order. So those intersections, College and Roop, and I can't remember the other ones off the top of my head. We've received those, so we're moving forward on those installations. We're still waiting on the purchase from NDOT, but I'm told that they have purchased it, so that's good. And then that's what I have. Thank you.
Great. Okay, and then our street operations report.
Street operations report. A number of items this month, a lot of weed abatement, weed control. A lot of flat work has been done since the weather was good, particularly in August. We were able to do a lot of those sidewalk repairs, driveway replacements, new curb ramps, and things like that across the city from our street operations crews. I also wanted to note that I haven't forgotten about Commissioner Novak's question about additional reporting for our traffic signals. I've been working with our control systems manager in figuring out what we can and what we can't report in terms of data, and we hope to have that next month for some maintenance and data just on the traffic signal component of our street operations side. So more on that to come. It's still on the list of things.
So I just have a general question, because it really, yesterday I was at a meeting, and just some general public feedback or questions saying, this last winter was really horrible and our streets have lots of holes and potholes and all this other kind of stuff and cracks. And so why aren't we moving to fix all of those? And yet we're doing Colorado Street. And so can you just, I'll kind of give a scenario of what I came up with is that how long does it take us for a project to come to fruition? So that's the first thing I tried to say, is it's not like Colorado Street was planned during the middle of that horrific winter, and that we should have diverted the money to go fill all the cracks. How long does it take? If I look at East William Street or Colorado Street, just for the public's thought process here tonight to track, are we averaging 3 to 5 years from picking a road to work on to its fruition?
Generally, it depends on the complexity of the project, but a project like Colorado Street was generally 2 to 3 years from the identification to probably the beginning of construction. There's something like Colorado Street had some public involvement to begin with. There was over a year of design and, close to 6 months or so of construction. William Street being a little bit larger corridor, more extensive outreach is probably in that 5-year range from, the inception of the beginning of the planning stages of the project to the actual construction of the project. So we're generally in that 3 to 5 year range for the majority of our reconstruction projects. A lot of our preservation projects, slurries and things like that, occur in about an 8-month to 12-month window. We identify them at the RTC in the summer. We move to design, like now, for instance, our airport and college and those ARPA projects that we discussed back in June are in the middle of design. We're getting 30 and 60% designs on those. They'll go to bid in the winter, and we'll see them constructed, a summer later. So those preservations, those pure slurries and preserve the good pavement are about a year time frame, more or less.
And then you did report to us at one of the meetings, or we talked about the website where the people could let us know that they had a pothole. And so I point to this report for people to know that we do. So if I looked on this one, you can see, and this is only through August.
This is a 1 month, and then the year to date would be July and August. That's
Right.
fiscal year.
So 57 potholes were repaired. And so I just think that sometimes we don't give a shout out for some of the work that's being done because it's not visible to you. And so that's what I was trying to express to that group, that we are doing pothole repairs. I'm sorry we didn't get to yours or make sure yours was identified, that we even know it's on a list. But the other question, and I had given this to Chris earlier, but I still think it's worthy of discussion because that's out there in the atmosphere, that we don't really sweep. So there is a ton, obviously, with the curb ramp issues that are going on, and everybody says, well, it just doesn't matter, Mayor, that's ridiculous, they never sweep. And so I had asked you, okay, what's my total miles to sweep? And your answer came out a little bit different, but I still think it's worthy of the public understanding the sweeping
Sure.
methodology.
So we strive to sweep every street in Carson City every month. That is the goal of the Street Operations Division. The city operates 3 street sweepers, and they rotate constantly every day, Monday through Thursday, to sweep the streets in Carson City. There are some times when we have weather events that could delay us. There are times when the sweepers break down, and that sometimes delays us. But our goal is to sweep every street in Carson City within a month.
And do you think we hit every street, at least gets done 6 times a year?
I would think so, yes.
Right, you can say, okay, I'm meeting that mark based on weather or
Yep.
events or whatever, 50% of the time.
Yep.
So I just, again, want that out there for the public to understand. It is a portion of our stormwater permits and what we do to maintain and keep things orderly and safe and functioning as
It's
intended.
better air quality, it's better for stormwater. Street sweeping is important.
Okay, so thank you. Does anybody else have any questions, thoughts, comments? Just one other, I might as well, under mine. There was a question that came in, are we using on Colorado Street concrete? Are we doing something different in what on Colorado Street than the norm that we do?
In terms of,
Material. Yeah, asphalt versus concrete, or are we doing something different or replacing it with something different that was there before?
so what we did on Colorado is, as we do with many of our projects, is we do an analysis of the ground underneath the street. Then what we did on Colorado is we did what's called a cement-treated base. So we mixed in cement with the native soil and aggregates to make the base harder because the soil underneath is soft. And so it's an improved section than it was previously because it was just aggregate on the native soil. So by adding the cement into the aggregate on top of the native soil, letting that cure out creates a little bit, I would call like a little bridge underneath the asphalt to allow the asphalt to last a longer period of time. There are areas in Carson City that have very soft, wet soils. I mean, that area of Colorado around Pat Lane and Silver Sage, I know there are some issues with certain houses and high groundwater table, and using a cement-treated base often bridges and extends the life of the pavement. It's a little bit more costly up front, but we get a longer lifespan out of the pavement, so we'll take that trade-off.
So I just want you to, people noticed, you know, and so I had that question put to me, and I got that probably 90% correct, but I just started off with, because we have such brilliant staff, they're always watching best practices.
Not every,
That was my answer to
yeah, I
that.
mean, not every road in Carson City gets that.
It doesn't need
Because
it.
the subsoil underneath there isn't as poor as it is in the Colorado area
Okay.
for loading.
I really appreciate that. Okay, anybody else have any questions, comments,
I
thoughts?
think one thing to add that I didn't hear mentioned yet, when you do the projects here, you're also looking forward for any below-ground work that won't come back later. You're trying to do sewer and water,
So that we
trench
only
cut,
cut once,
Yeah.
or, yes,
trying to stay ahead of the game, and that way, sometimes it takes longer, but
makes
the
the
end
project
result's
take
worth a lot
longer.
more.
Mhm.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Is that it? Okay, with that, we'll go to our final public comment. Anybody? And I'll just make a public comment that the new ice cream store on Winnie Lane, if you haven't had a chance, right behind McDonald's, go ahead and give it a try. It's a brand new business in town, and I think you'll be quite pleased with it. Anyway, I got to try the pecan just before I came, so you had a happy chair. Okay, if there's nothing else then to come before us, we are adjourned, and have a great night. And thank you.